You are listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is episode 178, Ferera. I'm your host, Haley Radke. Before we get started, I want to let you know how much it means to me that you're showing up here to listen to adoptee voices. I remember when I was first in reunion with my dad, and we hit the inevitable rocky patch after the honeymoon period faded. I felt so alone. I believed that I was absolutely unlovable because my first mother had ghosted me after a few months into our reunion, just a decade prior. For me, creating this podcast has been a tremendous labor of love so that other adoptees like me who were feeling alone, struggling in reunion, or coming out of the fog would have connection so we wouldn't feel like we were crazy. The wildest part of all of this is that it succeeded. Adoptees On has become our show to connect and share what the adoptee experience is really like. And I'm asking you today to support the podcast and make it sustainable for me to continue doing this work. I'm Haley, the host and creator of the show, our community's show, and I'm also a wife and mom of two little boys who are trying their very, very best to stay quiet as I record this.
Hi, Mommy.
They're trying their almost best to stay quiet. When you sign up for Patreon or donate via PayPal, you are helping me, Haley, contribute to my family's needs. What I didn't expect when I started podcasting was that this would become my full-time job. I'm showing up for you and saying yes to adoptees, and I would love for you to show up for me and commit to a year of support for Adoptees On. I have big plans and I want to do huge things for adult adoptees, but I can't do it without the support of you, my listeners. For the month of April only, I have a sale on for a yearly membership to Adoptees On Patreon with 1 month free. After that, it'll be back to regular price. I'm honored by the support I have already gotten from the community, and truthfully, pretty scared to make this ask again. But if I'm going to continue making the show, I really need your help to make it sustainable and to have the ability to meaningfully contribute to my little family over here and to hire other adoptees to help build the show. Click the link in the show notes or go to adopteeson.com/partner to sign up right now. Okay, let's get to the show. Ferera Swan is here to share her experiences of reunion and secondary rejection with us. We talk about the impact other members of the extended family can have on our reunions, and Ferera tells us about the meaning behind her name and what her producer encouraged her to include in her song, Second Time. We wrap up with some recommended resources, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are on the website adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Ferera Swan. Welcome, Ferera.
Hi. How are you, Haley? It's so great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I'd love it if you would share some of your story with us.
I'm a domestic adoptee, and I was born in Texas. I'm from Texas, in Houston originally, and I actually wasn't ever told that I was adopted directly from my parents. So I had asked my parents if I was born from my mother. Those were the words that I had used when I was about 6, and then again when I was about 8. And I think both times I didn't get a direct answer. But then finally, when I was 10, we were on a vacation in China, and that's when I ultimately asked, and they told me, my mom told me that I was adopted. So I guess I'm kind of diving into how I found out I was adopted. And then from there, I was able to go to the adoption agency when I was 15. My adoptive mother actually took me, and I was able to retrieve some documents, I guess my file, and it had a poem, a letter, and 2 black and white photos of my birth parents. They were photocopies, so I couldn't really see them very well. And then a bunch of, I guess social work, home visits and things like that, information around my biological families. And so I was able to get that when I was 15. And I've been in reunion since 2008. In 2008, I decided to search, And I found them on my own, actually, through Ancestry.com, not Ancestry DNA, but Ancestry.com. And I found my birth parents' marriage license. And so that was kind of a crazy thing to find because I didn't actually know that they were married.
Were they married before you or after you? Does she remember with the date?
I believe they got married after they relinquished me. So yeah, they were, I guess, high school. I mean, I don't know if you would call them high school sweethearts, but they were young and in love, and she was very young and he was young as well. But so yeah, that's basically kind of in a nutshell. I just kind of gave you an outline, but and then I ultimately met them in 2008, the same year. And that was quite an experience. I reconnected with my paternal family first, and then I ultimately found my birth mother's twin sister.
So they weren't together anymore.
Oh, no. They got divorced. So she moved back to Chicago and he went back to the Philippines. And so that was that. But I learned a lot about their story and the relationship and just, everything they had gone through at the time, where my birth father's family wanted to keep me. But ultimately, my bio mother's family decided to relinquish. For her, because she was, I believe, 16 by the time she actually had me, because she was 15 when she got pregnant. So
you found her sister, and how did you get in contact?
it was actually the craziest story. The way I found the marriage license was that on the poem that she wrote titled Never Forgotten, which was for Marilyn, which is what she named me, from, and I'm going to omit her name for her privacy, but whoever was in charge of whiting out the, I guess, identifying information, the last names, forgot to white out the first 3 letters of my bio mother's last name. And so those 3 letters were, I had seen them, all this time since I was 15, but I didn't think anything about it because I was like, well, I can't do anything with 3 letters, her first name and 3 letters. And that's when the guy that I was dating at the time suggested that I could maybe Google a Filipino last names database to see what I could find. And I had said, well, I'm probably going to find, thousands of names. And, but actually there were only 3 that I found on the website. So, and I just happened to guess the right one. And so I typed her name in on Ancestry.com, and their marriage license was the very first thing that popped up on the screen. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So that was really surreal. And I saw my last name for the very first time in my life. I mean, like, I wasn't even sure how to say. So I took the last name, and I was able to find, with the internet these days. And at that time it was like MySpace and, I think Facebook was around, but I found my birth aunt because her first name was in the documents. So now I had a first name and a last name, and she hadn't married or anything. So I was able to locate her, and I called her, I think like the next day or the same, I don't even know when, but.
What did you say to her?
I think I called her at work, and I said, and it was a New York phone number. And I said, this is going to sound really weird, but do you have a sister who gave up a child for adoption? And it got really quiet. And then, gave me her phone number, and then we talked later. And when we talked, one of the first questions she had asked was what my intentions were, not in a mean, like, what do you want kind of way. I think she was genuinely curious why I was reaching out. But I don't know. We chatted for, gosh, it I think it was like 4 hours straight. It was really, I felt an instant connection. And I'll just say that this is, I developed a relationship with this aunt like over the next, however many months. And we would talk sometimes on the phone for 7 hours at a time. Sometimes I was like, doesn't she have to work? I don't know. But I mean, they were just very, there was never any like pauses. It was just constant, so it was, we grew to be very close, but it was very tragic ultimately because I'm no longer in a relationship with my bio mother. Or my aunt. So there's so many different things. I'm just kind of thinking out loud and replaying all that happened, but it's really unfortunate because I think looking back now, I really wish I would have found my birth mother first, my biological mother first, instead of my aunt.
I'm curious about that. You got to say more about that. So how did it go from a 4-hour phone call with your aunt to meeting your biological mother, and then how it played out?
We developed a relationship, and then it was like, and then the three of us got on the phone one day, and I got to meet my biological mother over the phone first, but my aunt was also on that call, and that was such an amazing, surreal experience just to hear my mother's voice for the first time ever. And I've written about this before, but I was talking and then she paused and I was like, "Hello?" And then she was like to see if she was still there. And she said, "Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just listening to the inflections of your voice." And I remember that, like how that impacted me to hear that. And I always say that for the very first time, like the woman who gave birth to me was telling me, "I hear you." And I just felt like alive for the very first time. It's really what it felt like, the experience. And it's kind of a blur because I want to say, I think I'm not sure if I believe my aunt was on that call, but I do feel like she was very much a big part of this experience. So one thing I'll say is that she is a twin of my first mother. She's her twin, and they are very, very, very close. They have a very close relationship and friendship, and it's a very special bond. I'm not a twin, but I can imagine twins have that bond, and I think that her daughter coming back into her life after all these years caused some tension between, I'm kind of describing it from my perspective. It seemed like it caused a lot of tension between them.
So you said that your aunt hadn't married. Had she had any children?
No, and she does not.
Okay. And then your first mother, did she have any other children?
Yeah. So I have a half brother that I've met. I guess I should say we had reunion in Houston first. I met them. My grandmother flew down. My first mother flew down. My other aunt, and then me, and then my then boyfriend all met. And we had like a weekend together, and I'm a musician. And that night I brought my keyboard and we actually played piano. We played keyboard for each other for the first time ever, which was super, super cool and weird at the same time. Because, yeah, she just like writes music off the top of her head. I don't know. And that's where I get that from. I've always been able to do that since I was a kid, and she's always been able to do that as a kid. And my half brother is also a musician, and I got to meet him later that year when I flew to Chicago and met him when he was about 6 years old. So,
well, were you an adult when you were united?
I was 25. Yeah, I was 25.
Okay.
And and my bio mother was 41. So, which is crazy because my husband's like 43 now. And it's crazy to think that he's older than she was at the time. So, so many years have gone by, but it doesn't feel like it's been that long. But
I have that same kind of little bit of a feeling because next year I'm going to turn the same age as when I first met my first mother. And so it's a bit of a mind F as to say it as politely as I can, because you're like, oh my gosh, what would I do if I had this long list at this age? So it's interesting that you've got that little dynamic there. Okay, so you had this meeting and stuff, but you said that your relationship, it felt a little bit like it messed up, or was, I'm not sure exactly the language you said, but about your bio mother and her twin sister, because they had a really close relationship. And can you talk more about that? What makes you think that?
I think it would be helpful to share what happened the first time we ever met. So we were in a restaurant and we were in the foyer, and they walked in like as a group, and my aunt approached me first and hugged me. And then I hugged my bio mother, and of course we both cried like right there in the middle of the restaurant. And then so I later found out that was an issue for my bio mother. I don't think she liked that her sister hugged me first.
She got to talk to you first, and she got the first hug. Right.
And I later learned that there was an argument ensued over that, which was a very, for an adoptee, I think, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. I've never really felt, I've always struggled with feeling really, desired, wanted, like this, that's, special is not the right word. Just wanted. I've never really felt wanted in that way. And so to learn that there was an argument over who hugged me first, and I've gone over some old emails, which I cringe when I read them, like how I talked back then. But anyway, it was like kind of, I don't know. There really aren't any words for how it made me feel, but I was like, wow, she wanted to hug me first. I don't know, but it was also very unfortunate. I felt, I didn't feel guilty for it, but I felt sad that for them that this happened that they had a conflict over it. And I think that never quite, I was unaware of how that played out as the relationship continued, as the reunion continued. But I always kind of feel like that was a thing. When all these feelings of grief surfaced for me, and I was navigating all these emotions of anger that came up, and I really didn't even know why, what I was processing, because there's no like handbook for reunion, and you're just kind of, I think we like ran at each other full speed and just like missed each other is kind of how it felt like, because we were so close. And I think we were both navigating, I think she was navigating her grief and I was navigating mine, and we just didn't see like the other person's pain. And I don't think she could make room for my pain at that time, at that age where she was at, and with the information that neither of us had. So tragically, we stopped speaking. I asked if we could talk on the phone to discuss it. I wanted to talk about it, and I never heard from her again.
How long was that? How long were you in relationship with her before you had stopped speaking?
6 months or so, I think. And then, but what was interesting is my aunt reached out to me later, and we had a relationship. I don't know why I feel like I want to say on the side. That sounds really bad, but it really did feel like it was. I always wondered if my bio mother even, she made it seem like she was aware that we were in a relationship. But then, so the thing that I've never actually talked about on a podcast before, and I thought about whether or not to bring it up, but I think it's important because it's caused so much grief and pain, and just the things that I've been trying to navigate, like just on my healing journey. This was a huge event that happened. So I was continuing this relationship with my aunt, who I really was coming to admire and respect and really and trust. And then I was supposed to fly to New York to see her. And she ghosted me. Like, there was an event or two that happened on her end that made her unavailable. But then whenever I tried to follow up and reschedule, I really don't know what happened, but she just stopped talking to me. And I was incredibly hurt, and I was so confused. I had no idea what happened. I don't know. I really don't know what happened. And to this day, I still don't know what happened. And this is where we are. But I've got to say, what is one of the most hurtful things I ever learned years later is that a mutual friend told me that my aunt had made a comment. And that comment was, I just don't want her to think that she's going to get everything handed to her on a silver platter. And I wasn't really, I was like, really, I was so confused by that. I was so hurt by that. I think that there's a lot of biological families that have this kind of idea that adoptees are coming into their life because they want this, or they're just trying to get that, or whatever. And I'm like, no, we want to connect with our families. Like, I just find that so heartbreaking that they would suggest that, or that they would perceive that we have some kind of intention, some kind of any other intention aside from just wanting to connect.
Well, you said that in your first call with your aunt, she was trying to press you to see if you had some sort of ulterior motive.
Right. And I think as a 25-year-old, I was just heartbroken. I didn't know what I did wrong. Adoptees are constantly, what did I do wrong? So it was really, anyway, so there's where we are. And I think, and I don't know. I don't know what happened, what could have happened.
So we have talked about this before a few times on the show, and the language that we usually use is secondary rejection. So it's like, you got it twice. So your birth mother, your biological mother, and then your aunt. And I too got the ghost experience. And the reason I say we've talked about it before is because I've talked about this with several guests and lots of adoptees off air. It's like, God, couldn't we have just had a huge fight so I know the reason? Or couldn't you have written me just a really scathing email and be like, these are all the reasons I never want to talk to you again? Like something. Yeah. Just give me something.
Well, and I think that it just kind of echoed the why was I given up, like, layer of trauma and rejection that I think a lot of adoptees do experience. But one thing that, was kind of like what you said about, couldn't you just write me an email that, so that actually my bio mother and I did have an exchange that kind of preceded the end of our, I say the end, but why we stopped talking. But in her email, she did say that, I was making it all about me, and that, have I ever thought about how she felt, and I really want to highlight the fact that I'm not bringing this up to shame her feelings or shame the fact that she said these things at 41 when she didn't have any information about what she was dealing with. Doesn't erase how hurtful it was to me, because in adoption, it is always about the child. I believe, no matter what, if we're truly talking about the best interest of the child. But, I think she was hurt because I was where I was at with what I was processing, and we were just kind of not, there was a lot of telling me that I was being inconsistent with what, I would say one thing and then I wouldn't do it. But I think as adoptees, we know that navigating reunion is not a linear process, and we don't know what the heck we're feeling half the time. We're just kind of in this. It was the craziest experience in my life. I felt like I was living two lives. I was dealing with the guilt that I felt towards my adoptive family, like I was doing something bad. I had to make sure I was talking to them just as much because, it was just insanity. So yeah, I just think that's what's so heartbreaking about reunion is that we are up against something that's not normal, that nature didn't design. We're trying to navigate this thing where we come back together, and it's like, how do we build relationships that are authentic and that can sustain? Because I think I feel like adoption took that from us. I'll never know, probably. I have heard from my bio mother since. I reached out to her in 2000, I think it was 18, and I haven't heard back from her. Kind of explaining some of the things I'm sharing with you and kind of my thoughts on what happened during our reunion, why it might have unfolded that way, how I'm sorry that she's been sitting in her grief too, or having to live with her grief, and that she's not alone in it, because I carry that grief every day with her, and and just letting her know she's not alone in that pain. But I do think that she also grew up in a different time. I mean, she's not that much older than me, but she's from a different generation. And I don't even know if she's read it yet. The last time we had an exchange on Instagram, she told me she had not read it yet, that she would read it when she was ready. But here's the thing. I've got to say this because I shared a collage of my biological parents and I on Instagram. And one of the photos I used was a photo that I had of her that did not belong to me. I found it and I used it on the collage. And now, in retrospect, I should not have done that. I should have used one of my photos that I had of her. So that was an issue. But I got a message from her and I was like, my heart skipped a beat. And I was like, oh my gosh, she messaged me. But it was kind of, the language was kind of threatening. In a nutshell, it was like, if you don't take this down, I'm going to have to report you to Instagram. And so, but I chose to respond with kindness and compassion. But I was angry, and I think justifiably so. Again, it's that whole, you think that I'm posting this because I'm trying to, the word used was exploit, which is interesting because adoptees are exploited in adoption, And you know what? A lot of people, I'll just be really honest, are like, why do you even waste your time? Why do you even just forget her, move on? And I'm just like, I wish I could, but she's my mother. Let's use honest language. I mean, adoption relinquishment doesn't erase biology. It doesn't erase our primal need for that, that maternal connection. And so, but she did respond, and she was nice. And she did say she wasn't trying to be mean, but still,
So recently I saw, as of this recording, I saw something happen to you on Instagram, and you shared that you accidentally followed her on a social media platform.
Yeah.
And you tried to undo it right away, but there's always this thing, even when you said, oh, I reached out to her, 10 years later, literally a whole decade later. And I'm connecting with this because, like I said, I share this experience of secondary rejection, and I've reached out a few times.
Oh, wow.
And I think and heard nothing, like Zippo. And I think it's like from the outside looking in, it's like, okay, do people think we're like stalking them? Like, it's not. Like,
Yeah.
does once a decade, does that count as stalking? Does accidentally following and, oh my God, quickly unfollowing as fast as possible and just praying that their notifications are, not set? I mean,
it's so weird because, like you said, it's like, does that count as stalking? But these are the things that go through our brains. Like, we don't want them to think that, but then again, it's like, why is it the adoptee's responsibility to remain secret or remain out of sight, or like, don't even accidentally follow me because this, it's there's so much there that I feel is, and I'm going to use this word, unjust. I think it's not just unfair, it's unjust. The level, yeah. It looks like you wanted to say something. So
I do. I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
So for the last few years, you have become a meme machine, and you have so many really, it's the gamut. There's inspiring adoptee posts. There's adoption truth is what I would call it, saying statistics about different things that the community needs to know, talking about family preservation, talking about the challenges and just being an adoptee and adoption land, all of those things. How is that for you, being public about these struggles and calling out truths about the adoptee experience, and knowing that, your biological family can be viewing these things and seeing these? And,
Right.
Do you ever have a thought like, oh my gosh, well, maybe if I hadn't said that, maybe I would still have a chance. Maybe.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, Haley, because I think that's, I think about that a lot. So I would say that one of the most empowering, healing things for me is writing these things that I put on these memes and knowing that they're public, and knowing that other people know that I know that it's public. I don't know. It's like, it's like,
and that they know that I know that they know that they know that I know.
Because like I said earlier, it's not, we adoptees never asked for this. We didn't choose this path. We didn't choose to, and it has nothing to do with gratitude. It has everything to do with, you can't even fit it in one sentence. I mean, the loss and the grief. And so writing these things and posting them over the past few years have been incredibly healing and empowering. And yes, I've thought many times, because you go through a range of emotions when you write these things. You kind of relive that emotion that you felt at the time of whatever event you're writing about. So if I'm writing about something like that has to do with secondary rejection, I start feeling angry, and I start like, how could they, blah, 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 and so I feel that, and then I'm going to write this, and I don't care. I'm going to write it and I'm going to put it out there. And then I've backpedaled, I guess you could say. And well, maybe I shouldn't, I was in a bad place. I shouldn't have written that, because I've written about my experience with what I learned about from this mutual person about my aunt, the thing that she had said that was very hurtful. She had shared several things with me, this mutual person. And so I had written about that as well. And then thought, oh no, if they see this, there goes my chance. Like you said, like that, there goes my hope. But I was just telling my husband this today, and I thought, and if that's their choice, if I'm going to be, rejected again for speaking my truth and sharing my story and being honest, then that is on them. I've done nothing wrong by sharing my story from my perspective as an adopted person who was involuntarily separated from her mother and her family. And it's my absolute human right to share my story. And I do it by way of memes, and I do it more and more now through music, and because I think that's important, and integrating creativity and art with social justice and change. This is what this is about, because, like adoptees, just like recently, like right now, actually fighting for unrestricted access to our birth certificates and just all these things. And I think, fighting for our right to exist, basically. And I don't know. I think everyone's experience is definitely different. I've heard happy reunion stories, but honestly, I can't say that I hear a lot about secondary rejection.
That's very common.
I actually didn't know how common it was until I started opening up about it, and until I discovered the adoption community, and I learned, oh, I'm not the only one that this happens to. And yeah.
Back in the day, I used to work at when I was attending university, and I was working on my BA in psych. I worked at the library, and I spent a lot of time there, and I did a lot of research while I was reuniting with my first mother about adoption reunion. And one of the stats at that time, that's a long time ago, was like over half of reunions fail. And I was like, that's BS. It's not going to happen to me, right? Because you're in the honeymoon stage, so it's like everything's happy.
Right.
And it just didn't even occur to me that things could go so far south. Okay, that's a rabbit trail for another time. But I want to hear you tell us about your name.
Ferera is a combination of both of my biological last names. So I've stuck an A behind. It's a mixture of the two. And then Swan is from the story, The Ugly Duckling. I had a therapy session some time ago, like a handful of years back. And my therapist, we were kind of processing adoption and these really intense, deep feelings that I have always grown up having and experiencing. And then anyway, so she brought up the story of the ugly duckling, and she's like, oh yeah, it's like, it's like when the swan discovers that, I forget if it's a he or she, but the swan discovers she or he is a swan and not a duck, or, and that I guess I had a breakthrough moment in that session, and I just like broke down, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't say oh my gosh, but I was just quietly crying. Like I just had this moment of clarity, and it was so empowering and beautiful. And I and my husband was there, and yeah, so I just decided to, I guess you could say, rebrand as an artist. So that at the end of that year, and so everything became Ferera Swan, and I just all of a sudden was able to write about my adoption with no hesitation. I don't know, there was something about changing my name that really empowered me to use my voice. Like I think when I was under the name that my adoptive parents gave me, there was always like a filter on how much I could say, how I said it, what I could say, because I'm this other person. It's kind of weird, but yeah. So yeah, that's how yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I really wanted to get a chance to hear about your name because I knew you had chosen that. So is there anything I didn't ask you about that you really want to share before we do our recommended resources?
I think that reunion should be treated with a lot of care and a lot of empathy. I mean, as much as possible that one can provide for the other. And I think, and compassion. And I just think that's unfortunately not the place that people are, that's not the default place that we're in when we're navigating reunion. I know it wasn't for me, even for myself. That's, I guess, all I wanted to add to that.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So let's do recommended resources. And I have a whole bundle here because you're prolific. So first, I mentioned earlier that you love making adoptee memes. And so I love your Instagram. I feel like it's
Thank you.
educational and sometimes poignant, and it's kind of a really nice mix. And, you know, you mentioned you're a musician, and I wish we had gotten a little more time to talk about that. You released a single called Second Time, which is about your story. And so I really want to encourage people to listen to that. And it's on Spotify, and I'll link to all the places you can find that in the show notes. It's really powerful. And I don't know. I think people can really, you know, get a sense of your, you know, passion and emotion through hearing your voice in that song. And I'm wondering if you can tell us just a little bit about your choice to speak the last 20, 25 seconds of the song.
Oh my gosh.
If you would share that and just, yeah.
I said, oh my gosh, because I thought I didn't realize that you've heard it. But first, thank you for listening to that song. That last 20 to 25 seconds, I'll just share really quick, is the last line of the last email I wrote to my biological mother at the end of our, I don't know what you would call it, but at the end of when we stopped talking at the end of reunion. It was at the end of the email. And during the recording process, I was working with Rami Antoon. He's just amazing all around, but he used to drum for Seal. But anyhow, he had this crazy idea for me to read, first to put a picture of my bio mother in the vocal booth, and then to read the email that I last wrote to her.
He just wanted to make you cry. Sorry. Carry on. I bet it worked.
Well, before I did the final vocal, so I'm actually singing quite differently. I feel like when I listen to that song, it's different than how I normally would sing, but I was super in the moment. So I'm almost just like talking it. I don't know. I'm not sure if that makes sense. But anyway, so I didn't know he was recording me when I was reading the email, and he kept the last snippet of it and he stuck it on the back of the song and he left it there, which every time I listen to it now, I like cry every time.
Can you say it to us?
Well, it was something about always talk of, wanting answers. And, I was talking about, the adoptee experience. And then, but I think, oh no, you're going to make me cry now. I think all I ever wanted to know was that I was never forgotten. I think, and that was the name of her poem. So I used the name of her poem to, I don't know, is that called a tag end? I don't even know.
You're the musician. I wrote down, I was truly never forgotten. Those are the last 5 words. Say it.
I was truly never forgotten. Yeah.
What does that feel like?
I now know that I was truly never forgotten. I just think that it's heartbreaking that I can't imagine how painful it is for her to remember me this way, though, now. And for me to remember her this way. Remember in the sense of what we experienced in reunion and the relationship we could have had and all the could haves. And it's not ever about regret. I just wanted to add quickly that, from what I remember her saying a lot was, not looking back. Don't look back, move forward in life. Don't look backwards. Basically don't, leave your mistakes in the past and move forward. And I think yes and no, though, because we all know that whatever we don't delve into trauma-wise, grief-wise, loss in ourselves, that is very much in our present. It is.
And no matter how much you try to shove it down,
Exactly.
It's gonna come back. Yeah. Oh God. You know what? I've had a lot of therapists tell me that, in the last few episodes. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm being sarcastic, but yeah, it's true. Okay.
No,
well,
I know you get it. But
I do get it.
that's why I mentioned it.
If this is the first episode people are listening to, they're like, wow, Haley's being harsh. But no, I get it. It's like, stop shoving your feelings down, Haley. Okay.
It's hard though. Yeah. But I have empathy for, because it's painful. I don't think everyone is willing to go there. I think it's so that's why I think it's so tragic.
Yes. The other cool thing, I don't know if you guys know, is Ferera has a store, an Etsy store called Indigo and Swan. And you've got lots of really cool stuff. There's too many things to talk about. But I wanted to highlight the Adoptee Mantra that you have. And I've talked about a couple of different adoptees have some version of a similar, expression that's really meaningful for them. And it doesn't resonate with everybody. So I love, there's another one. Here's another one you can check out for ours. And I'll link to that in the show notes as well. But it's very empowering. And yeah, I really appreciate your words there. So I won't read it out. You got to go check in the show notes for that. What do you want to recommend to us now that I've talked you up?
I really would recommend J.S. Lee's book, Curium. Actually, she has 2 books I would really recommend, Curium and Everyone Was Falling, which is her latest release. And I would really recommend them because one, I think, well, for several different reasons, but I do think Everyone Was Falling is definitely a necessary, a much needed read, especially during the times that we're living in right now. It's just been so difficult for so many different reasons, but I won't spoil the book for you, but I think that's definitely a must read. And then Curium is more adoption focused as well as narcissistic abuse, which I have also been a victim of as well. And so I really connected to that book, and that book really changed. I was like bawling in bed at like 2 a.m., over Christmas break when I read it. I was like, oh my gosh, like the last line just got me. So anyway, I would really recommend those 2 books. And she's just a phenomenal writer, and she just really speaks to the hearts of all readers, I think. So for sure.
Yeah, Jessica's amazing. I had her on the show episode 151. So if you want to go back and you can listen to her story and a little bit more about her writing, and we talk about both of those novels. And I love adoptee fiction. We hear so many memoir, which is awesome. Love adoptee stories.
Right.
But to have an adoptee writing fiction that also sometimes have, parts of themselves woven throughout, of course. It's really awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's amazing. Oh my goodness.
She is. And she's multi-talented. She doesn't just write. She's like a painter. She does everything. So does it all. I
haven't said this anywhere, but I commissioned some artwork from her, and we'll see that at some point.
Ooh, how exciting.
Yes. She's very talented. Okay. The last thing I wanted to drop just before we say where we can connect with you is just because I wish we had talked a little bit more about music and your work with that. And, again, we'll send everyone to listen to second time. But also, I wanted to just mention that there's a playlist called You Don't Look Adopted that Anne Heffron curated. And it's all songs that adoptees recommend that the adoptee who recommended thinks these songs bring up feelings for them about the adoptee experience. And it's a huge variety of songs. It's like, oh my gosh, there's like hundreds and hundreds of songs on there. So I think it's so cool to go through and like pick out things that do resonate for you. Or I myself have a bit of an adoptee feelings playlist. And so, Alice Merton, No Roots is on there.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of people recommended Sarah McLachlan songs because she is also an adoptee.
Of course.
In the Blood, John Mayer, all those, you know the songs. But anyway.
Yes.
I just thought that would be kind of a cool resource to share as well.
That is cool. I actually didn't know that. Thanks for telling me about that. I had no idea. Is this on Spotify?
It's on Spotify. You Don't Look Adopted, and which is also the name of her book. But
right.
Yes, and it's adoptee curated, which we love. Okay, Ferera, where can we connect with you online?
So on Instagram, I'm Ferera Swan, FereraSwan, and then you can also connect with me on my website, which is fereraswan.com. And if you go to that site, you can find a bunch of different things like Instagram, I think iTunes and Spotify, YouTube, maybe on there, SoundCloud, some other things. But my blog is on there. So that's where you can find me.
All the places. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing some of your story with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Haley.
Thank you so much to all of the new Patreon supporters. If you are able to, and if you want to say Adoptees On has had an impact, this is a really great way for you to support the show and to say that with your finances. Adopteeson.com/partner has details of how you can sign up and get the extra podcast every week, Adoptees Off Script. And I'd love to have you as a supporter. I can't do the show without you, truly. And thank you so much for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.